Welcome to A Court of Transformation and Awakening. I'm Amanda Grace Harrison.
And I'm Lorrie Gray.
And today we have Chapter 2 of Court of Mist and Fury. Book 2 of the Court of Thorns and Roses series. We made it to Chapter 2.
Chapter 2. And we're still
in
in the darkness.
We're in the darkness, and in this chapter, we just get to see, basically, what life looks like, what daily life looks like now, outside of the nightmares and the nighttime rituals in the middle of the night. Now, what does day life look like? Which is its own kind of nightmare for Feyre right now.
It is at this point, yeah, because she's. So we see a few things in this chapter, but one of them is her relationship with Tamlin. So we're seeing her life after Under the Mountain, but it's very much connected to Tamlin not coping well. So we talked in the last episode about how Feyre's not processing her trauma. That's why she's still having every night is still horrible, but Tamlin's not talking about it either. And he's not doing well either. Nobody's doing well. And his stuff is affecting her in a way that's terrible, which is basically that he is not letting her leave the house. She can go like almost no place without guards, and she's suffocating. And the way that they're working through this is really horrible and unhealthy.
And he does he has really valid arguments. Like, I can't go out there and be hunting down these beasts all day that are still on the loose, that got into the property before we could put up the wards protecting the whole spring court. After Amaranth, this whole thing went down, she had released these beasts, and they're out there, and we have to go hunt them down and kill them. And I can't do that if I'm worried about you back home getting hurt or whatever you're wandering off and doing. So I have to keep you in this safe little bubble so I can go do what I gotta do.
Yeah, except for no.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's such a valid argument, and yet no.
And yet not.
But his face is ruggedly handsome.
It is, right? And it's true love, and that you died for it. I mean, I'm just like, how much of this is because of this story, right, where we just brush over it. But yeah, because early here, this is a conversation they're having a lot, like where they're saying he's saying it's not safe, right? So like one of the arguments is, I can't be doing my job if I'm worried about you. And honestly, I'm like, that's a thing you hear a lot in a lot of these novels, to the point where, again, I think we've sort of been anesthetized to it. If you read a lot of romantasy, that we sort of accept it. And she's kind of accepting it as well. But this other argument is like, it's not safe. It's not safe, especially for you. And it says he'd said that every time we had this argument. Okay, so we know we're having this argument a lot. We're going in the same loop. Gosh, how many of us can relate to that? It's like the broken record, like the argument that you go back to that we're not getting out of. Okay, but this broke my heart. Every time I begged him to let me go to the nearby village of High Fae to help rebuild what Amarantha had burned years ago. Okay, but this phrase, begged him to let me go. Like,
it's so cringe.
And it's one of those places where, like, that's not how the world works. Like, it's not how it works. Like, we don't need permission from other people to leave. But she felt like she did.
I love that you flagged that and bring that up now, because that will come up later in the series, guys. This whole let me conversation. This is not the last time we will visit this whole concept.
So it's not. And this, like, I struggle a lot with seeing the relationship like this, like as a coach, like working with people who have been in, in toxic relationships, like understanding like relationship drama. Like, there are certain things that are hard for me to see, like this, all of this. It's like, it's so uncomfortable for me to read it. So there's that's their thing. Okay. But then, so they have this argument though, but here was a bright spot. And this was a thing that in the midst of there being a lot of unhealthiness within their relationship, a point of healthiness, I feel like, for Feyre, which is he's getting ready to leave. And at the end of it, she says, fine, she'll stay. Like she gives up on the argument. Not necessarily supportive of that. But then she says, I breathed. I made myself look him in the eye, made myself smile. Be careful, I said, and meant it. Now, the smiling, like she wasn't really happy. There was some of that was false. I'm not just saying I'm supportive of that, but this idea of, said be careful and meant it. It's interesting, the idea that we can be like disagreeing with somebody and angry with somebody and still show up maturely in the situation, and we can still make those kinds of conscious choices within the relationship, because he's leaving and like he might get hurt, and like not just like storming off. It's like, okay, we are fighting, and also I love you and I do want you to be careful, and all of those things. Like it can be both. It's not like because we're arguing and disagreeing about this, like now I'm going to withdraw love and go get hit by a bus or whatever we would say, like in modern day things. Like there's this, like, I still love you. I'm still for you. I still want you to be safe. I still want you to be careful. I still want you to come back. And I'm going to say that as you're leaving. I'm not going to let like my upset over this lead me to make a decision in this moment, that I might regret if something happened to you. Anyways, I thought that was a little bit of a good moment. Okay, a little personal moment. Being raised in a family that I don't think didn't really have good communication stuff. There was definitely not nonviolent communication. Yeah. There was a lot of silent treatment. There was a lot of I'm mad at you kind of stuff. And I probably would have continued that into my early marriage, because I didn't start, making some of these changes and doing my own work until a few years in. But during the first handful of months after my husband and I got married, we got married. And then within a very, very short amount of time, two things happened. One, so we were in the married dorms at college, right? So like we're in the dorms, and the couple that lived right across the hall from us, the husband was in a car accident and almost died. It was a thing where when he showed up to the hospital, his injuries were so severe that they didn't know what to do, because I think like there was only cases of 7 people having those kinds of injuries and still being alive. Like that they honestly didn't even know what to do with him. So that happened. And so like every day, like where my husband would do something, that early marriage where like you're learning to live with somebody, and it's just so hard, or it was for me, maybe not for everybody else. It was so hard, first year marriage. And every day I'd leave the house and I would see this thing. I'm like, they're in the hospital, like fighting for his life. And it led to that, like, yes, I'm upset about this. But then when we would leave each other, like it was that reality that it could be the last time. And now I would do this, like I would take a breath. And it's like, I am upset about this and I still love you, and be careful. And like, I will see you later. And also during that same chunk of time, my husband was also in a car accident. He was in the car with his stepmom and his 2 half sisters, and they were hit by a drunk driver. Like, and it was intense. And we had those 2 things early in our marriage. And for that whole first chunk of time, whenever things were really, really hard, I had this ongoing reminder of like, yes, this is hard. Yes, you're mad. Yes, this is difficult. Yes, we would kind of like to throat punch him right now. And also you could lose him at any moment. And if you lost, like if he was dying, if he died, would this thing matter? And like, that was the question I asked myself so many times during the first year of marriage. Like if he was dead, this is so morbid. If he was dead, would I care about this then? And I'm like, no, I wouldn't. And it really, for me personally, actually was really, really great.
Yeah, very helpful
perspective for me. But I loved seeing her have this moment of like, it didn't matter what else was going on. When it was the goodbye point, she said goodbye and she meant it. And I just felt like that was a kind of healthy moment. And the thing that we can all do that. It's like, this fight is not over. I'm still mad at you and I love you, and be safe. Yeah. It can be both.
Yeah. It's more of the whole gray area. Relationships aren't black and white. Emotions, feelings towards each other. So nuanced. Such mix. Right.
Yeah. And some things, like not all, some of these like repeating arguments we have, the reason they repeat is there's so much in them. Like they're not going to get worked out in a single conversation. right? Like
Yeah.
they're not going to get worked out in a single instance. And sometimes working through all of them does take a measure of time. And it's like, can we still show up in the relationship in a way that we respect and that's true to what we actually believe? And like, can we hold both? And that, I think that's, again, that place where it's so much easier just to be like, I love you or I hate you. But it's like, no, no, no. Like, I love you and I'm mad at you. And both are true at the same time. And can I hold both and like show up with that? But it's so much more complicated than just
Yeah.
the writing the emotions of what we're feeling in the moment, being reactive to the moments we're feeling in the moment. To be like, I'm feeling this, and I also know that this is true for me. And can I hold all of that at the same time and then show up in a way that I respect? Yeah. So she did good job, Feyre.
Good job, Farah.
Okay, so he heads out, and then she goes back, and we get a picture of a few other aspects for her. The next one that I flagged was kind of her talking about her relationship to painting.
Uh-huh. I hate I hated it. All those paintings, all the supplies, all that blank canvas waiting for me to pour out stories and feelings and dreams. I'd hated it. She has not quite gotten back her.
She says she set foot in the room once when she first returned. She'd walked out moments later and hadn't returned since. And that she'd stopped cataloging color and feeling and texture. She'd stopped noticing it. Could barely look at the paintings. And I'm wondering, it's interesting, like, I don't think right here they don't fully explain all of this here. I think at this point we're left to kind of guess a little bit about what all of that's about. But what was your interpretation of this? Because one thing we see, I think, in this chapter, and there's several passages through this where she just doesn't care. She's just not trying. Like there's a measure of, we see depression, right? Like we
For
see
sure.
major hints of depression like all through this. But I read this, I was like, I didn't actually read this as depression. I read this more, and it could be, but I read this more like the self-loathing, almost like an I don't deserve this.
Mm.
Almost like I don't deserve to be happy because of what I did. I don't deserve to do things that I enjoy because of what I did, as opposed to like, yeah. And there is this, like, I'd stopped cataloging it. That felt a little like depression, but there also felt a little bit to me in here of like, I don't deserve this thing that I enjoy. But how did you read
Yeah,
this?
I'm sure she's got plenty of that not deserving going on because we know that's how she thinks. And here she's saying like, I've got centuries now, but perhaps I'd sort myself out sometime along the way in all those centuries, but perhaps not. She's like, probably not. Hundreds of years is not going to be enough to
Well, not if you keep
sort me
pretending
out.
it's not there so that Amarantha
Yes.
doesn't win, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that was the thing, because I'm like, if the paint thing was just depression, it would just be like, okay, I went in and I tried and I couldn't find anything, right? Or I couldn't muster up the energy. But this was like, I walked in, I saw it, I walked out, and like that felt different to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I was thinking about this, like how sneaky sometimes this is in terms of when there's trauma and when there's that, like, I'm broken, there's something fundamentally wrong with me, there's shame over stuff in the past, how it can show up. And a lot of times my people, like my clients, they don't see it and they don't necessarily believe me right away. And sometimes there has to be layers and trust built before they see what I see. And interestingly, I'll see this with my clients who have businesses, which, I mean, okay, most of my clients are female entrepreneurs of some point. They're artists and actors and musicians and coaches and, uh, you know, business owners of some sort. But they will work so dang hard all the time. And they want to talk about working hard and working harder, and they beat themselves up for it and all of those things. But again, the idea of like, what, I had this conversation with somebody recently. They were talking about their schedule. Like, okay, I'm going to switch like this to my work hours and this to my work hours. I'm going to do this like this. I'm going to do like this. And like, what do you think? I was like, where did you schedule in rest or fun or play? And then I get like the eyes get big and they just kind of freeze and say nothing. And they just shake their head like, no.
Am I even allowed to do that?
Right. And that's like so often, like, And we don't see it because sometimes it just looks like, oh, I'm just being productive. I'm just getting work done. I just need to do this. And it's sometimes so subtle, or it's like, well, I just don't feel like it, or I just have responsibilities, or I just have kids. And I think a lot of people aren't being honest with themselves, but a lot of times the reason that we're not letting ourselves do the fun things is because on some level we don't think we deserve it, because there is that story deep down that we were the person that was born broken. We were the person that's not whole and complete. Like maybe other people are whole and complete. Maybe other people are good. Maybe they deserve that. But like, I probably just need to put like my head down and work and like prove that I am allowed to be here.
Yeah.
So I don't know. So when people say like, I don't know how, or I just don't have time, I'm not gonna say I don't believe them, but I definitely ask some follow-up questions. Because I think it's often they're pulling a Feyre here. Of like, if you knew though what I'd done in my past, you would know why I don't really deserve to go have fun.
Go do what I love. And it doesn't help that she's got these trigger colors. Like if she sees her red paint, she's gonna go off. So
do we see that in this chapter? I think
that might not be till the next one.
Yeah, I think that's a little bit later. We'll see, because I think I did mark that. But yes, but for those of you who haven't seen, part of the paint too is the red color of the paint is part of one of her trauma triggers. I don't feel like that gives too much away to say that, because we already know things are rough. Okay, yeah. So poor thing. So we've got this depression. This place where she's talking about, not that I tried. There's just a bunch of stuff in here that she just doesn't care about. She just doesn't care.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's sort of that section, and then we flow into, so how do we decide that we say it?
Ianthe.
Ianthe, we think, is how we say it. Listeners, definitely, you can let us know if we're saying it. You can let me know if I'm saying it wrong. Probably
Ianthe, yeah.
Ianthe, the high priestess who is with them, and we get to meet her. We get to learn about this whole different section of the high fae that we've not learned about, and sort of how she plays into things in the spring court right now.
No, the wedding planning.
Yeah. Oh yeah, she does. Okay, speaking of that, yes, you're right. There is like the red hair. So I'm on page 17. I think you have a different. We have different copies right now, so our pages aren't going to be the same. Right. But she does talk about, because she asks her, do you want, what color roses do you want? Petals, yeah. And she says, not red.
That's right. Yeah.
I hated that not color. Red. Yeah. Amarantha's hair, blood.
Not red.
Yeah. Yeah. So she does say it. She does say it there. So we do find out in this chapter that the color, she definitely has major issues with the color red. Okay. The one passage now I had marked, and I'm curious if you had anything before this, but with Ianthe is, Feyre looks at her and says, I often wondered what it was like to be that free and so settled within yourself.
Yes. Which I have that one marked also, with her inherent female magic that she's witnessing Ianthe. Yeah, I would definitely like polar opposite of Feyre's physical experience of being in her body. And then you've got Ianthe, who's just this perfectly poised, beautiful, self-contained, super confident, super just very confident. I don't think in this chapter you see yet, but very confident around males. She's just doing her thing, man. And I can see how Feyre would just be like, wow, I sometimes wonder what that would be like to be that free and sure of yourself. Yeah. I mean, I've had moments like that too, where I've looked and I'm like, I have trouble like wrapping my head around it. Right. Like I've met women who just are really in touch with their sexuality and things. And that's still very much like a journey for me. Like I'm way leaps and bounds from where I started. But like, then I see somebody who really embodies it. I'm like, yeah, I'm not there. I can't even imagine what that like totally feels like. I'm excited for the day when I get there. I think I will get there in this lifetime. But I've definitely had those moments where you look at somebody else. And I think that
in those moments, we always get the choice as to whether or not we're going to look at that like in a compare and despair sort of way, like you're this and I'm not, and therefore there's something wrong with me, or like you're this and that means that that's perhaps possible for me too. Like if you can be that free and settled within yourself, perhaps I can be that free and settled within myself as well. And so, and I always have to catch myself of like whenever I see somebody who is more of something or in a different place than I am, I'm like, am I using that to use against myself, or am I using that to see possibilities of where I could go to and to see that? Because if it's the latter, it can be interesting to be like, okay, I wonder, and like this idea of like, I wonder what it's like to actually imagining embodying it. Like I wonder what their thoughts sound like, I wonder what their emotions are like, I wonder what's going on that lets them feel that way. And that sort of imagining can be, I think, really, really beneficial.
Yeah. Very. And that's not what Farrah's doing here. I don't think she's actually doing an exercise. Like,
yeah, she's not.
I wondered.
She's not. Oh, one more point before we go on. That reminded me, there was a shift that I made with that at one point, because whenever I used to see, when I would see women who were more confident than me, so often I felt intimidated. And we may have, I never know what I've said on this podcast already, but I used to talk about other women and say like, they are intimidating, like that there were certain women who were intimidating as a whole, as if like it was a thing with them and I'm just reacting to their intimidating energy.
They're just an intimidating person.
They're just intimidating. And now I'm like, nope, I'm intimidated. And like there's a big difference between they are intimidating and I am intimidated. Because if they're intimidating, there's nothing I can do about it. But the truth is, most of the time that was about me, because I felt small, I felt less than, because I was doing a comparative thing. But I'm like, no, like they're powerful, and like, but there's also a place where I can be powerful too.
Yeah.
And whenever I felt intimidated by other women, I'm recognizing that's always that wounded part of me. Back to our last episode, usually something happened, and I just flash back to this younger version of myself that feels very small. Yeah. Right. That feels less than, and I usually feel younger is usually my thing. I don't know if that's true for everybody, but
probably.
Yeah. But I'm like, always like,
that used to be one of my favorite quotes, that Eleanor Roosevelt, no one can make you feel inferior without your consent. And I remember the first time I read that, just be like, why would I ever give my consent to someone to make me feel intimidated? I'm just gonna stop that right now. I need to not give anyone my consent to make me feel intimidated.
That concept, though, that's a really powerful concept, and it's one that like sometimes people can hear it and sometimes they can't. But I think the same thing goes with like respect. People like, I was disrespected. Like nobody can disrespect you without your opinion or without your consent. Like they can say words near you, and either it's like somebody said words that are so completely untrue. Like you can said some words. Somebody can say words and you're like, they're an idiot, or you can be like, oh my God, they disrespected me. Yeah. But really, a lot of these things, there is consent involved. I actually saw somebody, it was an actress. Gosh, I wish I could remember who it was now. She is at least, she speaks at least 2 languages, maybe more. But Spanish is one of the things that she speaks. And she was saying, like, if I'm talking to you, she's like, I could be saying the most awful things to you in Spanish. Like I could be yelling at you, cussing at you, saying the most horrible things. She's like, but if you don't know Spanish, you're not hurt or offended. You may actually laugh at me because seeing somebody rant and rave in Spanish in like a language that you know, she's like, it may actually even be humorous to you, but you're definitely not going to be hurt because there is a space of consent there. Yeah. Now, that doesn't mean that if somebody says something awful that we're like, well, it's completely on me to decide how to interpret it. There are also places of like, that's not an okay thing to say. And that's a different thing. Like what you said was not okay is also different from what happens in me, and like having some ownership for that. So the fact that we do get to have measure of like what we give permission and consent for doesn't mean that therefore it's our responsibility just to manage our reactions around what every human says. That is and I've seen people take it that way. I'm like, no, that's not the thing. That's totally different. But there is a space where we do get to decide whether or not we give people that power over us or not.
Yeah. I choose not to.
I'm
When I'm conscious.
I'm
When I'm
working to
conscious
choose
of it.
not to. But the other piece with this is a bigger conversation that I've been having so much recently. But the other piece of that, guys, is it's always about perceived power.
Mm.
Because if you look at, there's a big difference between a person said something and in the way that I perceive it is that we have equal power in the relationship is different from I perceive myself as having more power versus I perceive them as having more power. And the concept of like gaslighting, like we don't typically feel gaslit by people who we perceive as having less power than us. We don't usually feel gaslit by people who have the same power as us. We typically only feel gaslit if we see the person as having more power than us.
Mm.
So there is a place in there where yes, as much as it, there's our responsibility, there's all those things, and there's certain things that are just not okay. Like the crucial element so often with this is power dynamics. And yeah, so I mean, and it's why, sometimes I'll take a thing. It's like, okay, if this person says this thing, I feel gaslit. And I'm like, okay, what if a 4-year-old said it to me? I'd be like, kid, quit. Right? Or different situations, because it's not about the words, it's about when it comes from somebody who we perceive as being over us. So anyways, just another element to add into that, with how when and why we might give consent for that.
Yeah.
Because if we perceive them as having authority or deserving authority, right, then their words always come across a little bit differently.
Yeah.
But that's been a big thing. I'm like, nope, I'm gonna keep that. I'm not less than. That's not how that's gonna work.
Yeah. I almost feel like Ianthe is almost like trying. Yeah, she is. Just we are old. It's like she's trying to play on that a little bit, just so that she can like, this is important what we're saying. What I'm saying, we've discussed this. Our kind. We've discussed this. We are old and cunning and enjoy using words like blades and claws. Every word from your mouth, every turn of phrase will be judged and possibly used against you. Be on your guard. No stress.
No, well, I mean, and you're right. And this is one of those things where we see Feyre being like, I just don't care. And she talks about, even with this, she's like, if I were being blunt with myself, I'd admit that Ianthe had become a crutch, but she seemed willing to do it, caring when I couldn't bring myself to. And this is speaking of codependent relationships.
You did say we'd get to it.
We did say we get there, and we didn't talk about it with Feyre and Tamlin, but this one, yes. This for sure. And that's the thing. So Feyre can't be in that place where she takes this lower role, like without consenting to it. But also it's interesting too, but like Ianthe seems that she wants the power dynamic.
Yeah.
Right. This idea of like she does want to be above her. And whenever Feyre tries to give it up, she does not encourage Feyre to embrace her power and her agency and her choice. Like you can tell she enjoys being that. Within drama triangle language, sometimes this is called the rescuer. Like those of us who we like to swoop in and rescue people. It helps us be powerful. It helps us feel good about ourselves. Or sometimes it's ego or different things. But as much as Feyre's like, well, I just don't want to care. And like, you can take, like, she gives her permission to take this role, but she also chooses to take it where she wouldn't have had to. She could have been like, nope, I'm not doing that. Nope, I'm not stepping into that role.
Instead, she's like, heck yeah, I'm stepping into that role.
Yep, I want to. Like, she wanted to be in that role. And that's where, like, it's not healthy on either end, but both are giving consent and both are getting a thing from it that they want. Ianthe gets to feel the power, and Feyre doesn't have to care. Somebody else can do all the caring for her. So they're both. Feyre's giving up the power, but Ianthe's happy to take it.
Yeah. She's very happy to take it. Bless her heart.
Oh, here. What was your first first impressions of her? Felt like mixed to me, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's like it's so nice that she has a girlfriend finally, and she's like getting to do these fun things with her, and they're just picking the wedding flowers, and they're picking everything. So it seemed fun, and she gets to, she's just got a buffer there who she gets to talk about things. She got somebody keeping her company while Tamlin's going off hunting all the time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the same thing. I was like,
Okay.
there were parts of this where I'm like, oh, yeah, I don't know. But like I think even from the very beginning, I was like, I wasn't sure exactly how I felt about this person. Like it was very mixed because like there were parts of her personality that rubbed me the wrong way. But again, like Feyre needed somebody, and this person was there. But,
Yeah.
okay. So I've got one more point here at the end. I'll see if you have anything else. There were two, so it's page 23 for me, towards the end, where so she and Tamlin talk and he apologizes. And she says, it's fine. I understand. And she says, not a lie, but not quite the truth.
Quite true.
Right. So we see her telling half truths here. That has been some of my recent work. It's been hard work. I am currently reading, there's one more point I want to come back to. I am currently reading the book by Martha Beck,
Yes.
The Way of Integrity. People who are in my current circle right now, some of you are going to listen to this podcast ages later. I'm going to be way past this, but like my current people are going to get really tired of me talking about this. I think I'm going to run a book group around it. But so much about it is being honest. And one of the challenges in the book is to pick a period of time. She did it for a year, but she's like, pick a week, pick a month. But she had a year of being completely honest and talking about the different ways that we lie. And sometimes it's simple of like how are you? I'm fine. I'm good. And we're not all the way, or we don't say the whole truth. We say the part that's acceptable, right? Or we don't say anything. And this challenge and she puts out this challenge to tell the truth 100% of the time. And I haven't like fully, like I've been slowly working towards that for a while, but it's interesting just to notice all the times whenever we tell half truths and why and what's happening and what's going on there. Yeah.
Because there's plenty of it in there where it is just like Feyre says in the book, like it would take more energy. Would you say it would take more energy than it was worth? So it takes a lot of energy to speak the truth when it's something that's not going to be it's fine. Like if it's something that's going to rock the boat and it went from a simple "how are you doing" question into a whole "how many hours do you have to work this out with me?"
Yeah. And one of the things she talks about is like not every person is the safe person to tell our full truth to, and not every situation. Usually, yes, but she's like, but at the very least, we need to tell it to ourselves, and sometimes we don't even do. Sometimes we don't even do that. Fascinating. I'm going to get the exact specifics wrong because I don't have the passage in front of me because I didn't know I was going to talk about that till this moment because that's how this podcast works. But they did a study in there, and I believe it was with people who had pain issues, like chronic pain issues. And when they told even like 3 fewer lies a week, they had a reduction in pain.
Wow.
Like this idea of like telling the truth, it's not, it's like, oh, it's not just about like keeping the peace. Like the idea of like we're not really fully in integrity. Things are out of alignment. That truth has to go somewhere. Yeah. Right. So it's been very, very fascinating. And I'm really loving, I'm not all the way through it yet, but it's really challenging, the idea of like being deeply honest. And she when she went through this journey for herself, like it upended her entire life in a really dramatic way. And she still is like, yeah, she's like, if you think that it might burn some bridges and make some people mad, it will. She's like, I'm not going to say it won't.
It will, yeah.
And it's the way to happiness, and it's worth it. And I still believe we need to do it. But she's not one of those people like, oh, I told the truth and everything went well. She's like, it was a dumpster fire. Like it was bad. It was bad and still worth it. So I love that she doesn't gloss over like the pain of it. She's just like, but also it's worth it. But so anyway, so this stood out to me this time. Again, this is probably not a thing that would have stood out to me before, but I'm currently so deep in this work of like, where am I not saying the truth to other people?
Yeah.
And not because it's wisdom, but because I'm afraid to. Where am I telling half truths? And more than that, I'm like, where am I still lying to myself about this? It's been good work. It's been good work. Oh my gosh. But yeah, those people who are in my coaching community, look out for our certain amount of days of tell the truth all the time thing. It's going to be fun. We're doing it together. My poor community.
Feyre needs to be in your community so bad.
It's going to be so good.
Feyre needs in there.
So good.
She needs to learn to speak her truth about she doesn't like the colors of the dresses. She doesn't like all this wedding planning. She's not speaking up about any of it.
Like thank goodness she spoke up about like not red, but
yeah, not red. That's my one thing I'll say.
Yeah, not red. She did say that. She's not complete. You know, she's got too much spark in her to say nothing. Okay, though. Last part in here that was like really stood out to me as perhaps being relevant for all of us was Tamlin's idea of like, soon you'll be my wife and it'll be fine.
So good.
We'll leave all this behind us.
Somehow that's like, going to make everything better.
So here's what's going to happen. We're going to walk between these two chairs. We're going to each put a ring on, and then now everything is fixed.
Yep.
You don't have trauma. I don't have trauma.
I can tell you it fixes any problem. Any problems you have going in life, just get married. Everything's suddenly better.
Like it's... Oh my gosh. And like from the outside, like when you actually step back, it's like, that doesn't make any sense at all.
It was such a bad idea.
But not just weddings. Okay. Like pulling it back. It's not just like, oh, we'll get married and it fixes our relationship problem, which there's a lot of people that's like that. There's a lot of people that's like, I'll get pregnant. We'll have a kid and that'll fix everything.
Yeah.
No.
Fix everything 10x.
Yeah. That doesn't make everything better. But I'm like pulling back, for our listeners and, I have to look at this for myself too. It's like, where are the places where I'm like, oh, once I just get here, it'll be fine.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay, so right now, it's like, okay, I have this, this schedule in my business and it's really, really hard. But like, if I just do it for 6 months, then like, I'll get to this place and I'll get this, and then it'll be fine. Mm-hmm. And then it'll be good. Or like, I'll hit this amount of money and then everything will be fine. And like me and my spouse won't fight about money anymore. That's not me. We don't fight about money, but like whatever it is like, we won't do this thing. You're like we'll just hit this point and then the thing will be done. Friends, I'm so sorry to tell you. I'm not sorry to tell you the truth. I'm sorry that this may like upset your worlds if you like really hear it, but you can change your circumstances, but your brain goes with you. And if you have drama over your spouse about money and then you get more of it, either it just shifts to more arguing about money in a different context, or you just go find something else to argue about, because it's not about the circumstance. It's not about the situation. It's about the stuff in our brains. And you can change as many things as you want externally. If you don't change your brain, if you don't change the patterns, if you don't break the cycles, if you don't do the things, it's like new day, new flavor.
Yeah.
It's the same stuff repeated with a different flavor. It's like we've got this, like these relationship things when we're single. It's like, then we get married. Okay, great. Different version of it. We have a kid. Great. Different versions of it. You're right. And it just gets more complex. But I think so many people do this. It's like, well, once I lose weight, once I do this, once I hit this place, then it's like, it's just going to magically fix all this stuff that's wrong.
Which is sad, but at the same time, it's also really hopeful and empowering, because it means that you can fix that stuff without even having to change the external. If fixing the external doesn't fix the issues happening on the inside and in our thinking, then we can actually fix that without having to change the externals. We do have power over that.
And that is the empowering thing. You're right. I'm glad you brought it back to the positive side of that, because that's the truth. And it was one of the coolest things. And I think it was probably one of the reasons that I wanted to be a coach in the first place. Like, it was the part of coaching that felt like magic to me. And initially I only saw it through the lens of like mindset work. And like, I see what I do in such a broader lens these days. It's not just connected to this thing, but the very concept that like, it's never the stuff outside of us that creates our experience of reality. It's always the stuff inside of us. And that you can change your entire experience of reality without having to change the stuff outside of you. And I was like, and like, one, that was empowering to me at a time when I felt very helpless. And so that was really, really helpful. But it kind of felt like magic too, where it's like, oh, it's like this thing stayed exactly the same. This person stayed exactly the same, but my experience of them changed because I changed, because my brain changed. And it did just feel so cool. And it did feel empowering. And that's why I tell people all the time when I tell them that, there's kind of like sometimes there's like a letdown, or like the way that they experience it through their lenses feels bad to them. But I'm like, no, think about it. If the only way for you to feel better is to change and control the world around you, we're screwed. Other people don't like to change. Like, we can't control the entire world. If that is the solution, we are screwed. The truth that the rest of it can be what it is and we can be happy is actually one of the most freeing, empowering, lovely, beautiful, magical, wonderful things I've ever heard. It definitely brings a lot of hope to a situation. So I agree.
Yay for hope.
It's good news. And we don't, it's not a let's just wait till we get here and then it gets better. It gets better now. And we're always about as happy as we choose to be.
Yeah.
Yay. Okay, friend, any other thoughts from this one? Is that all of our thoughts?
No, that's good. Yeah, there's plenty, but I don't need to talk about any of the rest of it.
Are you sure?
Yeah. No, I mean, let's see if there's any brilliant. Yeah, she's just praying that she'll learn to love the dresses.
No. Oh my gosh, there's so much stuff in that one with, again, talk about honest moments where, yeah, she's not being honest with herself in so much of this.
Yeah, and this whole image that she's having to put up for all of, the whole like, oh, if she's got to have all of her stuff together so that it brings peace to the land. Like that's that's a lot of like, you got to make sure that you have your stuff together so that, because it's like everybody's been suffering for 50 years and now we've come out of that and now you're the poster child for being whole, happy, and restored and peaceful.
No, so if
you have a bad day, you're going to take the whole kingdom down with you. So don't have a bad day.
Right? No, oh my gosh, you're pressure. That is a huge theme in there. Oh gosh. Wait, so like parallels for us. So back to this book that I was reading, the way of integrity, which next few episodes I'll probably keep referring back to if it's relevant. But she was talking about like the only reason any of us break from integrity is to like adhere to like societal norms for the sake of acceptance, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, this is what's accepted for you of your culture. Like, and if you do anything else, it's taboo. She's like, and that can be the culture of a friendship, a relationship, a family, an extended family, a community, a country. Like there's a lot of different versions of it, and they all have their own rules. And you're not allowed to break the rules. And it's always in this attempt to not break the rules of the larger group that we step out of integrity with ourselves. Right. Yeah. So this space where they're like, this is what the larger community as a whole needs from you. Yeah. And it doesn't matter if it doesn't line up with who you are or what you want or what is true for you. We're all just going to need you to do this thing for the stability of our belief in how the world is. Yeah. I mean, it feels extreme right here because they're talking about like this post thing, but I think that there's actually a ton of parallel between what she's experiencing right here that causes her to be out of integrity with herself and what we experience in a family. Yeah. A family that is all one political view and we're the opposite. A family that believes this religious thing and we don't. And we're saying what's true for us, again, families, even when they're dysfunctional, there's a homeostasis, like, and sometimes being in integrity, it disrupts all of it. And there's like no, you can't do that. You're not allowed to do that. You can't step outside of the rules. You can't break the rules. And so we break our integrity instead. And we break ourselves instead. Yeah. Oh gosh. Yeah, poor Feyre. I think that part had made sense to me at some point, but I'm so glad you brought that up, because I'm just sitting here with this and like reconnecting with her and this thing on a different level. I've even had this with, like, as a person with chronic illness, being a part of like the Spoonie community. I don't know if you guys get like the Spoonie reference. It's if you have chronic illness, you get it. If you don't have chronic illness, you probably don't. But this group of people, and then the day whenever I realized, I'm like, I don't know if I really identify as that anymore. And I kind of want to step outside of it and talk about other things. And like, there was sort of if I go and say, yeah, the way that we all thought about that, I don't know if I believe that anymore. I don't know if I identify with that anymore. I don't know if I think that anymore. This idea of like, I'm abandoning my people.
Yeah.
You can't grow beyond the people. Like, what will the people think about you? And I had so much drama, friend, with my family, with the chronic illness community, with different things, like these unspoken rules of like, you just don't do this. And the fear with it. Oh my gosh. So I'm just reconnecting with this chapter and with Feyre on such a deeper level right now. Because as much as like, we're like, well, just say what you mean. It's like, it's really hard when you're in the moment.
Yeah. And when it's not just you and one other person, this is just you, and the circles go wider and wider of who all we're affecting with our integrity and lack thereof. And it's the ripple effect, man.
It is. And more though, I believe integrity is still the way to go.
Heck yeah.
And her lack of it here is what's creating so many problems. The thing, and I can understand why she does it. I totally get it. I've been there too. There's no judgment there. I'm like, I just feel you on every level here. Feyre.
Right.
And also integrity.
Yep.
Okay, friend, thank you for sharing that one. All right, and listeners, thanks for being here with us today for chapter 2. There is, again, so much gold in this book. I mean, gold in so many ways, especially as we referred to in the last chapter, the gold that fills in the broken parts. So thank you for joining us for this episode. We can't wait to see you back here next time, where we will be discussing chapter 3. Bye.
Bye.